Oh my goodness. That, Jason, is probably, I think, the hardest question you're going to ask.
Interviews with writers, filmmakers, artists, and actors.
That's a good question, though.
That's an interesting question.
That's a great question.
Count on Sci-Fi for Me to be there asking all of the questions.
It's another great question. These are all really good questions.
Bringing you news and opinion from all over the web. Sci-Fi for Me, delivering the multiverse since 2009.
No, the Rancor! Rancor!
On.
I mean, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I suddenly looked and didn't have winky blinkies for the mics, even though I turned them back on, and apparently when my computer reset everything last night, it changed all of my default settings for just a second.
That always
Just a
sounds
second,
like
we
fun.
didn't have anything. So hello everybody, welcome. We are live here in the Rancor Pit. Mark Delfonso is there, and my name is Jason Hines.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking Star Wars tonight. We're going to talk the Disney earnings call for just a brief little bit. And we may have other people jumping in here a little bit later on. I think Mrs. Boss is feeling a little under the weather, but I think Sam Sentman may join us a little bit later. And I do think the plan right now is for Valliant Renegade to join us a little bit later on in the program. He's gonna be over on Midnight's Edge for a little bit, and then he's gonna jump in here. We're gonna talk about the earnings call from the Walt Disney Company yesterday, and we'll do that in a little bit. But first of all, the very, 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 very important thing that everybody is really wanting to know. I mean, this is just very important, and it's I think I'm gonna sleep better, maybe, knowing that we're going to get possibly more Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, so so the story here is that Ewan McGregor was at, where was this? He was at Superhero Comic Con 2022 in Texas, and during his appearance, this was posted by somebody called Kenobi is Eope. There's no plan. There's no official word about season 2 thus far. He says there's no plan to make one yet, but I'm pretty sure they're just biding their time. Nobody's approached me yet. So that's the latest official, unofficial, here's what's going on with Obi-Wan Kenobi season 2. There's not one. And hopefully, wait a minute, let me turn that one off. Hold on. I know what I did there. Hopefully there's not one, but I think season 1 of Obi-Wan Kenobi just basically set up whatever Reva's spinoff was going to be. I don't know that we're going to get any more Obi-Wan. Who knows? We'll see.
Jason, didn't we already establish that season 2 was basically guaranteed to happen, though?
Well, see, the thing is, and hello, Dr. Mama, good to see you in the chat. The thing is,
hello.
We were told at the very beginning of all of this that Obi-Wan Kenobi was going to be a limited series. We had the 6 episodes, and that's it. Done. So
Mhm.
if they decide they're going to go back and do season 2, which might happen given that they did some reshoots at the end in order to allow for that opening, maybe. But from the very beginning, we were told that it was a limited series. It was one and done, and that was the
Yeah.
expectation going into it.
And I'm just like, I'm racking my brain trying to think of a story for that, and I can't think of anything. Like, where could they go
Well,
from that? Like, it was already a stretch with the first season, so it's like I don't even know. It's so strange.
yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's putting it very, very, very lightly, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Mindy's in the chat. And she says, as long as no one has approached him yet, that means it's a thing because we always find out that nobody is Lucasfilm and they'll be there. And you look at what Liam Neeson, various different interviews from Neeson, who basically said, "Oh, I don't have any interest in coming back to television. I'll do a movie, but I won't do a television." And then here he is. He shows up in the TV show. So
Yeah, and it's like I feel like, especially with Disney properties and stuff, like I wouldn't be surprised if like they had like spies watching the actors, making sure they don't like say anything about what they're working on, because like it reminds me of that whole thing with Tom Holland, how he can't stop spoiling Marvel movies. So it's like I know as the Disney personnel, they have to be really careful what they say. So, like, I can just imagine that Ewan's just like, "Oh, I have no idea."
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
And Andrew Garfield is just as bad. I mean, everybody asking him whether or not he was going to be in Spider-Man: No Way Home, and he's like, "Oh, I don't have any idea what you're talking about."
Yeah, and he keeps hamming it up, and like he did it to such a degree where he's like, "Yeah, he's gonna be in the movie." There's no way he's not.
I have frequently complained, and this goes back even further than that because J.J. Abrams has done it for almost all of his movies. The idea of lying and deception as part of your marketing plan to me is unprofessional and unethical, and
Yeah.
we see this happening more and more and more and more. Stephen Moffat did it, Russell Davies did it
Yeah.
with regard to Doctor Who, and we got Andrew Garfield doing it, we got J.J. Abrams doing it. Tom Holland doesn't get told anything, so he can't spell things. But there's
Yeah.
this idea of we're not going to tell you the truth because I I get that they don't want to spoil it for people going
Yeah.
into it, but Hollywood has lost even more of its soul, I think, in the last few years with the embrace of deception. I mean, they cut the trailers sometimes. Trailers will make things look like it's going to be something, and then it turns out not. And okay, we're whetting your appetite there. But you come up to the interviews and you flat out lie. That crosses a line for me, and I don't like that kind of thing.
I agree with that. And it's like, again, like, especially in like Andrew Garfield's case, I feel like it's like it comes from a good place, but it's like still, you don't want to blatantly lie to people because it was the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah.
That spoilers for the last Spider-Man movie, but it's like it's been like a year now. Come on, guys, go watch it. But like it was pretty much the most obvious thing in the world that him and Tobey Maguire were going to be in this movie. So it's like, I don't know, like lying to people. It's not good.
Yeah.
You go to school as a kid to learn that lying is bad. So when you see people like Spider-Man doing that, it's just like it sends the wrong message, in my opinion. But
yeah, it just I don't know. It takes a little bit of the shine off the apple for me, I guess. It just
Yeah.
you know, and just want to thump people and say, stop lying. Just if I can't
Yeah,
talk about it,
that's
you
true.
know, just it's a simple thing. I can't say. I can't tell you. I can't answer that
But
question.
But then it's like when you say you can't talk about it, like they probably think like, oh, it's so obvious. That's basically their way of saying yes. And it just like I am so glad that I am not like an actor in that position because I would lose my mind if I had to deal with that stuff. Because it's like I'm honestly surprised like Tom Holland or like Mark Ruffalo, they haven't just completely went off the deep end with that stuff and like they take it in stride. They have handled that way better than I would have if I was in their position. I would have gone crazy a long time ago if I had to work for like Disney or Marvel as an actor or something like that.
Well, and we're hearing that, CG people who are working for Disney and Marvel are losing their minds anyway too because of
Oh
unrealistic
yeah, I heard about
expectations
that.
and timelines. But it strikes me that if we are to get a season 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, you'll either have, I mean, everybody knows where he is. I
Yeah.
mean, Reva's out there. I mean, there's nothing. This is something that I've had kind of a question about anyway from the very beginning, because if you have Luke Skywalker living with his aunt and uncle, and Anakin knows where aunt and uncle live. I mean, he's been there. We see this
Yeah.
in the prequel trilogy, and he's been at the Lars homestead. He's been there. So if there was any possibility that Anakin would have offspring, I would say the first place that I would look would be Tatooine at the Lars homestead. So it never really did quite make sense to me that Luke Skywalker would be going by the name Skywalker on Tatooine. But, the original trilogy was one of those fun, we're not going to put a whole lot of thought into it. There was no giant universe at that point in terms of continuity and story and whatnot. And they didn't even really have Darth Vader's backstory fleshed out totally at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it makes more sense. Leia Organa, she's got a completely different name. She's hidden basically under a different family name. So was Luke Skywalker then bait?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
yeah,
you're still using the name Skywalker.
like that would be an interesting what if story though. I think like what if he was bait and it's like Obi-Wan thinks he can fight Vader and then well maybe it was because they ended up on the Death Star, who knows, and then he did end up fighting Vader.
The problem with that is the problem with that is the same problem you have with the first season is Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are not supposed to have met. This show breaks canon for anybody that really cares. I mean, a lot of us that sit there and say, "Oh, well, it's Disney Star Wars, it's fan fiction, it doesn't really count." But it transgresses against established continuity. When I left you, I was with the learner. Okay, well, you left. That didn't really quite line up with what we saw in the prequels. You died. I mean, that was Obi-Wan walks away from him and leaves him for dead. So you could argue that Anakin left Obi-Wan when he switched to the dark side. I left you. I'm not your student anymore. Okay, you can make that argument. And now he sits there and now I'm the master. The way this dialogue plays out in Star Wars, this feels like the implication is this is the first time that they've seen each other since Anakin's fall to the dark side.
Right. Because it's like I always forget in like the last scene of Revenge of the Sith when it's like parallel Padme giving birth and Anakin turning into Darth Vader. Even though those rooms look exactly the same, they're in like two completely different places, right?
Yes.
So Obi-Wan Obi-Wan and them didn't know that Vader is what became of him until much later, right?
Well, see, the thing about it is, though, Obi-Wan knows that Anakin is Darth Vader. Because
because
name,
he was technically
he sees the
Okay.
the security footage, the stuff, where Palpatine gives him the name. He saw that. That's in the prequels. Now,
Right.
he doesn't know, or he probably doesn't know that this, the monster is what he became with all of the mechanical stuff. But in 10 years of time, since the end of episode 3 up until the point where we get into the Obi-Wan series, at some point he would have to have run across some mention of Darth Vader. Even without knowing what he looked like, what the machine was, or any of that. Because, hey, I left Darth Vader dying on Mustafar. What do you mean he's still alive? And my first thing would be to get on the net somewhere and say, who is this Darth Vader character? What's going on? And find out what's happening.
And it's like, it's definitely one of those things too, I feel like, because he's supposed to be like one of the head honchos for the Empire. So like, aren't there at least like any rumors about him or something like that?
Sure.
Like,
I mean, you would
no
expect that there'd be all sorts of people talking about this terrible, scary boogeyman named Darth Vader, right? I mean, he's the Emperor's enforcer.
Yeah.
People would be scared of him all over the place.
And it's like, I know he was in the middle of the desert for like God knows how long, but it's like, I still feel like, come on. There's no way that he heard about him.
Right.
Like, he wasn't keeping tabs on the Empire at all. Like,
right.
Come on.
I mean, right. Because, you pull yourself into a cave and you bury yourself. That's not very good security when you're supposed to be watching over someone.
Doesn't seem as good an idea as he probably thought it was.
Yeah. Well, and so now you get into a possibility of season 2, and really the only thing that you can do is what you did with season 1, where you have either he stays on the desert planet all the time, in which case we get 6 episodes of sand, or he gets pulled away from Tatooine again, and he's got to go through whatever this rigmarole is to save somebody again in order to go back to Tatooine and watch over the kid, which is what his first job is supposed to be doing, that he's not doing that well. So, and you're not doing what you were assigned to do by Yoda anyway. You leave the planet.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just...
But it's like, I'm honestly, like, if they do end up doing season 2, like, as much as I complain and stuff, it's like, I'm still gonna watch it just cause at least the first 2 or 3 episodes, because like I would just be curious of like, how the heck, like, what are they gonna do with this? Because I legitimately can't think of anything that would be like even halfway decent.
Now, American Comics has got a good idea here. I had forgotten about
sci-fi for me.
No, I don't want that. I want that button there. All right, so the mention of the Hutts, the idea of the underworld and the criminal organization, they're very good, very tapped in with all this information that they have. So if Obi-Wan makes some kind of connection, not necessarily with Jabba, but somebody within the halls of Jabba's palace, now you could turn it into a spy and intrigue series. Now you could turn it into
actually be cool.
I'm watching over this kid, and now I'm keeping tabs on everything that's going on out in the Empire through this it's like Casablanca, right? You've got Rick running the bar, and you've got the soldier guy, the police chief. Round up the usual suspects. There's gambling here. Shocked I am. That kind of thing. And having that relationship where he could sit there and say, "Hey, okay, Vader's not anywhere near here. He's over in that sector. He's over this sector. We're gonna throw a few red herrings over on that direction." And
Yeah.
Obi-Wan maybe uses the Hutt organization in some way that deflects attention away from Tatooine and has Darth Vader off, on these wild goose chases for 20 years.
Yeah.
But
I think
still
it would
don't.
be cool if they did the first half hour of Return of the Jedi that takes place in Jabba's palace and stuff, but do that with Obi-Wan. Cuz I feel like that whole, again, I think that's why people like Mandalorian so much, because it delved into the underworld side of Star Wars, and we don't really see a lot of that, and that idea that you had of spies and intrigue, that'd be really cool. I'd watch that.
I think hang on just a second here. All right. So, where was it? Yeah, I mean, having that, but see, the other part of it is there's no purpose to the show in the first place. So yes, it would be cool to see Obi-Wan coming into Jabba's palace like that, and have that shades of Return of the Jedi. But then what do you do? And the Mandalorian works because the Mandalorian is Boba Fett. If you take basically the Mandalorian that we're getting, Din Djarin, is Boba Fett with the serial number filed off. So if you had, if I don't know if it was originally supposed to be Boba Fett, but everything that we assign to Boba Fett as a character from all of this time, from the very first time he ever showed up in the holiday special in The Empire Strikes Back, he's this mysterious man with no name, doesn't talk very much. He's eerie and creepy, and he's a bad guy. He's a really cool bounty hunter. And all of this stuff that surrounds him, that fans have attached to the character. All of this mystery with the character made him really cool, right?
Yeah.
And then he died like a chump. And Lucas has even said, if I'd known that the character was going to become this thing, this sensation, I wouldn't have killed him the way I did. Of course, hindsight's 20/20. But you have in the extended universe, in the novels and books, that he survived, and we've got that story, and now we've got it again in the Disney stuff. But I have to wonder if The Mandalorian started out as a Boba Fett series, and because Boba Fett was dead, quote unquote, we had to do something different, and so now we get a different Mandalorian. We get Din Djarin instead of Boba Fett. I have to wonder about that. I haven't seen anything one way or the other, and maybe it's just a Mandalorian. But I have to wonder if that show was Boba Fett, because there's so many shades of Boba Fett in Din Djarin. And he's the character that we've all grown up expecting Boba Fett to be. This is the character that we see Boba Fett being like in all of the books and all of the stories where he shows up.
Yeah. He's Din's cool for all the same reasons that Boba Fett was cool in the original series. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I wonder if maybe this show was supposed to be Boba Fett and it ended up getting flipped somehow. I don't know. So,
and then this goes back to what I keep complaining about, how is they keep using pre-established characters in these things, so that's something that they can't do. And then look what happens. The one time they do it, they get far and away their most popular series. So it's again, it keeps giving credence to my
The other
theory that
the other
we should.
complication of that is once they have the Mandalorian, he's a big hit. Well, now there's talk about, okay, well, where's Boba Fett? Where's Boba Fett? And now you have, okay, well, let's bring back Boba Fett. But the problem with that is that once you bring back Boba Fett, and Din Djarin has all of the things that Boba Fett that was Boba Fett, now Boba Fett doesn't have any character. So you've got to completely reinvent him, and I think that's one of the reasons why the series, the book of Boba Fett doesn't work. Because that's not Boba Fett. That's not what everybody expects to be for that character.
Boba Fett's the Mandalorian, but the Mandalorian's off in a completely different show. So
right,
yeah,
essentially, that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's talk. So that's the one show. Let's talk a little bit about the other show, because we've been getting some leaks about the Acolyte. Bespin Bulletin has been reported about it. The Reddit threads, we've got some stuff about it. So it's let's take a look, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. All right, let me see. That's 7 days ago. Let's go back. This is 14 days ago. Let's see, July 27th. This is a Twitter user, and it also got posted over on Reddit. Neruodo1. Acolyte plot details. 50-50 on this one, not gonna lie. Heroine's little sister is ripped away by the Jedi for training, and she joins a bunch of dark side acolytes to train and get her back. Acolytes do missions and pick each other off. The last one standing becomes the Sith apprentice. This is the beginning of this leak thread, where this kind of thing. Okay, maybe we've seen bits and pieces of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we've seen the sister ripped away from the family. I think that was in a what was that in? Was that in a what was that in? Where did I see that? Was that in a Visions? Because Visions anime is not canon. But I want to say that we've seen this. I don't know. But anyway.
Like, I definitely know again, I'm a big video game nerd. People know this now. But it's like, I do remember that the whole, like, picking each other off thing as a Sith apprentice is something that happens in, like, the Old Republic games and, like, the extended universe things where you can choose to be a dark side character. So I know that's not.
And it makes sense with the whole that, always two there are. When Yoda says with the Sith, you have the master and the apprentice, whereas with the Jedi, you have all of these Jedi all the time. Which is it's kind of odd, but that's the way that works. And you have the bad guy, and you have the bad guy's sidekick, and eventually the sidekick kills off the master, and so you start looking for the new one. So, you have that. Didn't they do that with Maul? Mindy? Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
like that. Like, isn't that basically like his whole arc in the Clone Wars is that he has Savage with him, but there can only be two, so they have to kill Palpatine, and then that ends up not going well for them?
I would have to go back and watch those again.
Definitely my favorite part of the Clone Wars was his whole arc through it. It was good. I recommend it. Watch it again. Watch says, actual good Star Wars.
Yeah, right? Doxy Mama says, I dropped Disney Plus, so I'm out of the loop. Only saw seasons 1 and 2 of Mandalorian. It would be cool if they did a Knights of Ren series.
Yeah, flesh out those characters, because the movies didn't at all. So
I have to wonder two things with that. One, did J.J. Abrams have a plan for them that Rian Johnson scrapped? Because Rian Johnson scrapped pretty much everything when he did Last Jedi. That's one question.
Yeah.
And two, Was Abrams thinking that these Knights of Ren characters, was he thinking maybe he traps lightning in a bottle twice and they become the modern equivalent of Boba Fett? Ooh,
Like
look at these
I
mysterious. We're not
was
going to say very
thinking,
much about these characters, but aren't they so cool? Because they're the
yeah,
bad guys, right? You know, and we never got that potential realized because by the
yeah.
time we get to the Rise of Skywalker, things are such a mess. It's a mad scramble to fix things, and I don't think anything ever got fixed. But
Like I'm thinking maybe they do end up like Boba Fett, where like in the movies they aren't really expanded upon, but then maybe in like supplementary material they do eventually make them cool.
maybe,
So
maybe.
I could see that happening. Again, I won't hold my breath on it, but I could definitely see that happening.
Well, I could see. I kind of like the idea of it being an animated thing because if you do it like Minnie's saying in the chat, you know, Bad Batch only with villains, you've got some
Ooh,
potential there.
that would be cool.
You could
Yeah,
do
that does
basically
sound
your
cool.
Bad Batch and your anti-Bad Batch with the Knights of Ren. But
Mm.
honestly, I don't know. See, the thing is, we still don't know the dynamics of what's going on internally in Lucasfilm. Because we hear there's a civil war. No, there's not a civil war. Everything's fine. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's fighting each other. We hear, you know, the latest thing that I've heard is that, you know, Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy hate each other to the point where they won't even be on the same Zoom call with each other, much less be in the same room together. So, you know, there's all of this rumor and hearsay and stories about the internal strife that's going on at Lucasfilm. I don't know that they have any kind of a cohesive plan at this point. I think Favreau and Filoni might be going off and doing whatever they're doing. And I'd heard that he essentially abandoned the Book of Boba Fett when the Skittles speeders showed up and said, "All right, that's it, I'm done." And he went over to Ahsoka to work on that with Filoni and just basically abandoned Boba Fett to Rodriguez and Kennedy because boy, I think we talked about this the last time. He nixed the idea of the Rainbow Skittle Vespas, and they showed up anyway. So
every time you say it, it makes me laugh. It's like,
well,
why?
I mean,
why is that a thing?
That's what they are. I mean, that's essentially what they are.
God.
But if you had something, I don't think that anybody who is on the side of Favreau, whether Favreau and Kennedy are on opposite sides or not, Favreau has shown that he's got a little bit more of appreciation for what Star Wars is than Kennedy does. So if you're sympathetic to Favreau's point of view, let's say it that way, I don't know that a Knights of Ren series would be a good idea because Knights of Ren is connected to the sequel trilogy, which was such a terrible, disastrous turn. And since then, I think Lucasfilm has done a lot to distance itself from those three films. I mean, every now and again, yeah, we've got this article that says Oscar Isaac would be willing to come back to Star Wars, and you know, Daisy Ridley has said maybe, you know, that it might could happen at some point, whatever. But the fans don't want it. You know, they've so tainted the well that you know, we don't want these characters. There was so much, and there was plenty of potential in The Force Awakens with these new characters, and all of us knew that they were going to be handing off from one generation to the next. They had to, because all of the original cast are in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They're not going to last very long. They've got to hand off to a new generation. We knew that going into it. But it was so ham-fisted and done so clumsily. And then Rian Johnson does what he does and basically breaks the franchise. And it was done at that point because
Yeah.
The Last Jedi, backlash from The Last Jedi is what gave Solo its failure at the box office. And that's when Bob Iger snapped back and said, okay, we're not going to do one Star Wars movie a year again. We're going to rethink this plan because the fans spoke up and said, you screwed up. We're not giving you our money anymore. And the franchise hasn't recovered from it, I don't think. Not yet.
Yeah, like Rise of Skywalker is still the last like theatrical thing that they made, right? There hasn't been anything else that I'm not aware of.
Right.
Okay. Because like now they really have just been focusing in on the Disney Plus shows. Okay.
Right. And really, the two things there is if they didn't have Disney Plus to sell, would we have gotten the Mandalorian? Because the Boba Fett movie that Josh Trank was supposed to do, that messed up right there at the beginning of everything. All right, let me do this here real quick. Let's admit Mr. Valliant Renegade. Hold on just a second here. Let me get my screens switched over here. There he is, right there. Let me do that, and no, not that one. That one. Where'd he go? Where'd it go?
Can y'all hear me?
I can. Yep. Hey, Valiant Renegade, there you are. Let me see. Where did that? Hold on.
Oop. Should I start playing like the Monty Python song in the intermission?
All right. I'm missing a. Yeah, Valiant, you're there. I can see your camera went off, but I can see that you're in the call. Where did that go?
Where did I go? I don't know.
No, hang on. I'm missing
I crack myself up sometimes.
Hold on. Where is that? There he is.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Because I'm not getting anything.
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's been forever since I've used Zoom, so
that's how it goes, right?
I got to see why I'm not getting audio. Hang on.
All right. Why can't I see?
Let's see. I think I got it. All right. How about now? Can y'all hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Can we hear you?
Now I can hear you.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
I've got a hell of a lag here. It looks like, but yeah, I haven't used Zoom in a long time. So I'm just curious, do y'all like this better than StreamYard, or what do y'all?
It gives us a little bit more flexibility on the layouts that we use here for other stuff because we do the streams all through OBS, and so StreamYard has interesting tools, but I haven't found that it's doing everything that I need it to do. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
I know. It's a little bit limited. It's kind of an easy one and done thing. I think that's why a lot of us use it. It's just, but I get it. Yeah, I know there's a lot of limitations to it. So let me see, because I know my Zoom connection is flickering. I don't know why, but as long as you guys can hear me, I guess we're good.
Yeah, I think, but I don't know why I can't get Mark's close up back. I mean, I know there's a setting, and I'm not sure what's going on here. Hold on. That's weird. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're just going to do this. We're going to do that and that, and I'm going to. So we haven't gotten into the earnings call yet because I wanted to wait until you got here, Valiant. But it strikes me that we didn't really get a whole lot with regard to Marvel or Star Wars in this thing, in this call on yesterday. It was all sports, and linear and streaming and
Yeah, that's what makes them money. Marvel and Star Wars don't.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line. It's rare on an earnings call like that you will hear, especially for a company that's as broad scoped as Disney, that they would dive into. Here's what's coming up. Here's what we're working on for Lucasfilm and for Pixar and for Walt Disney Animation and for Marvel and for. That's not what they do on those earnings calls. That's the analysts that are listening, the investors, the institutional investors, frankly, don't give a flying flip about any of those properties because they don't make any money for Disney. And I was just talking about this the other day. I think I posted this on Twitter. Talked about this on the live stream. Was talking about this over in Midnight's Edge a bit ago. And just for everybody watching, I realize for a lot of Star Wars, I'm a Star Wars fan. I was a Marvel fan, especially phases 1 through 3. Since then, it's gone to pot.
Yeah.
And I was talking about take the best year for Disney at the theater, 2019. You had Endgame, $2.8 billion global haul.
Hey, Andrew Trivio.
What's up, Jay? I don't have a Rebellion hat. I do have a great Welcome to the Rebellion, like the OG first gen. Well, I think I showed it to you. T-shirt. But I don't have a Rebellion hat. But everybody knows my SIG hat now, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's
a suggestion in the.
Hope you enjoyed
chat.
SeaWorld yesterday. We're sorry we missed it. But here's the thing. Understand this about Star Wars and Marvel. In 2019, you had Endgame that brought in $2.8 billion globally box office sales, which netted back to Disney somewhere in the order of, let's say, $1.5 billion, $1.4 billion in that range. Made it back to Disney from the theaters for that.
Right.
Okay. Maybe a little bit less because a big chunk of that was still China. Thank you, buddy. I'll make it up to you whenever I get to Welcome to the Rebellion podcast. Just, I'm still waiting for that invitation that never comes.
I've been waiting for mine too, but you're likely to get it before I do. So.
No, Jay and I have this running joke because, we've been talking about it for months.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of times he had an open slot, invited me in, and there were weekends like the family, we had something going on. I couldn't make it. I was out of town or something was up. And then when I am free, he's got some high level guests booked. So we keep ripping each other back and forth. Like, I'll never come onto his show. He never invites me to his show. This is just we just have fun. This is why I love Jay.
I think
there's good people on YouTube out there. We can banter like this, but some people actually think we're at war with each other for some reason.
Well, and I think this is the first time you've actually made it to our channel because we've been kicking back and forth ideas, and discussing to get you on for a number of times for some different things. So it's good that you finally made it.
It's tough, and it's back to school week this week for kids, and I know Jay can appreciate that. I don't know if it's back to school week out there in Florida, buddy, down there in Orlando, but I know it's back to school week here for my three. Yeah. But getting back to this, so 1.4 billion back from. That's Renegade Jr. He's out fishing. He's on the radio right now telling me so. But the point is that 1.4 billion from that, if you took Rise of Palpatine that came out in that same year, where they pulled in about $1 billion globally, Disney probably got back about 450 of that, again, because there was a chunk of China in there, which might have just covered their cost. And let's throw in Toy Story 4, which I don't think came out in 2019. I think it came out in 2018. But that was a big Pixar movie. So Disney's three biggest studios, right? Pixar, Toy Story 4, Rise of Skywalker, Endgame. The revenues that Disney got from those three biggest hits in that 12-month span from those studios did not equal a single quarter of revenue from ESPN and ABC Sports, basically.
That's crazy.
And that's every quarter, every freaking year. So when you look at stuff like that and you consider like, well, how can they, how are they not asking about this? How are they not asking about that? And look, that ad revenue for ESPN and ABC Sports, that doesn't even hold a candle to what they kind of bring in with parks and merchandise and resorts.
Right.
So when it comes to revenues on Disney's balance sheet, when it comes to that with their operating income, those films, and I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about DVD or Blu-ray sales or secondary and tertiary markets like pay one, pay two windows after movies leave the theaters, which Disney doesn't have at all anymore because they all keep it in house with Disney Plus. So all those multi-billion-dollar contracts they used to have with places like Netflix to put it out there after it left the theater, that's all gone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the issue. And so those kind of things don't come up on earnings calls. What most of the analysts want to know when you listen to it, and it's like that every single quarter, unless there's like a big smash hit that will directly affect Disney Plus. Now they do mention, like on this earnings call, they mentioned Thor: Love and Thunder,
Sure.
and they mentioned Lightyear had come out, and they mentioned Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it was mentioned in passing as part of a preamble to JPEG's prepared remarks for the call.
I thought it was
they didn't
interesting.
dwell on it.
Yeah, because they just mentioned, well, we had Lightyear come out, and now it's out on Disney Plus, and they went right over it, and I thought, well, they didn't spend any time on that at all.
Because there was nothing to talk about. Yeah, it's on Disney Plus.
Money.
Moving on.
Yeah, it didn't make any money.
No, it lost. Disney lost around $200 million on that turd.
But
That's crazy.
Listening to this call, though, I get a sense that, well, even the bankers, because none of the questions during the Q&A focused on anything having to do with creative, whether it's Disney Plus or anything in the studios. That it's all distribution, the ad tier levels that we're going to get introduced, and sports, and and occasionally a parks question. But it shows, especially when you contrast it with the Warner Brothers Discovery call last week. The guys that are involved in money for Disney are not interested that much in the studio side of things. It's like you're saying, the studio is dropping the bucket for everything else that they've got.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you look at a company like Warner Brothers, or you look at a company like Paramount, they're more of a Johnny One Note, right?
Yeah.
Warner Brothers and Paramount make film and television products. Period. That's it. Disney is a very multifaceted company, and they have been far more of a parks and merchandise company than they have been a film and entertainment company for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Even through the golden age of MCU in the last 10 years. Now, those films were so big that they drove a tremendous amount of merchandise sales, and they drove a tremendous amount of park interest. So the parks and the merchandise side can certainly benefit from a great film or television show performance. There's no doubt. That's been the case for decades. I mean, look at Mattel, look at Hasbro. Back in the 80s with Transformers and He-Man, you had a toy line that turned into a massive hit TV show. You've had massive hit TV shows and movies that have turned into big toy lines. Think of old school Pixar. Think of Toy Story. Think of Cars. Think of, we talked about Cars yesterday. Cars 3 absolutely tanked at the box office. Disney didn't care. Why? Because Cars to that point had racked up like $7 or $8 billion worth of merchandise sales at the retail level. Minions Rise of Gru. Minions Rise of Gru coming into this new movie had racked up, since the first Despicable Me movie, over $6 billion in retail sales for that merchandise line. Do you think Universal really cared if Minions Rise of Gru made a whole bunch of money at the box office or not? Or did they look at it as, look, we're spending $150 million between production and marketing for this film as an advertisement for another $2 billion of Kevin Stewart and whatever the other one's name is. That's all they wanted.
And
that's it.
And that was
right
the plan.
now, the Disney movies are not doing that. Nobody's running out to buy new girl sidekick from Lightyear, whatever her name was, for the movie nobody saw.
Well, and
nobody's buying Reva costumes for Halloween.
Yeah,
okay, that's not happening.
It's kind of
for
like
10
the old
years.
Batman
Disney
movie.
owned Halloween with Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't happening anymore.
Well, and you look at what was it, Batman and Robin, which everybody has apologized for, but that was the Warner Brothers marketing department saying we want it to be a toy commercial. Here's all of this stuff.
Yeah,
now we
for
can
bat nipples, right?
Yeah. And I've talked about Marvel missing opportunities to sell their comic books with their comic book movies and stuff, but you're right, there hasn't been a big push, especially on the Star Wars side. Merchandise doesn't sell, and the people aren't buying the action figures or the play sets or the whatever, and then they turn around
None of the new stuff.
Here's $150,000 or $15,000 Yoda figure or a Grogu figure that you can have custom built. Here's $5,000 for this drink and a trip to Rancho Obi-Wan or whatnot. Now here's this $6,000 you can spend 2 nights in a tin can, and we call it Galactic Star Cruiser. The public face of this has been Star Wars is for rich people. There's no merchandise. There's been no appeal to the general public with this stuff, and the quality of the shows that we've been getting, the movies we've been getting, nobody's buying the stuff anyway.
Well, I'll go one better on you. How about this? In the second fiscal quarter report, which was not the one we just got, but the one prior to that,
right?
The one that was that Disney did in May. One of the line items in there when they talked about merchandising sales, I thought was interesting because they mentioned, well, we had higher return, for this quarter in this area because of this, that, and the other thing. And then the last thing on the list that they mentioned, this was actually scripted into the earnings call, was classic Star Wars.
Yep.
Not Star Wars. Classic Star Wars. They specifically used the word classic in the earnings report. And I had to stop and laugh because I'm like, well, that means that they ain't selling Reva.
Right.
They ain't selling Rey.
And wasn't there
Kylo.
Something that said that
they went back and they started selling Luke, Leia, and Han and Vader.
But there was the
surprise!
Other thing too,
it worked.
Yeah, there was the other thing too is that in one of these calls, and it may have been, I don't remember if it was second quarter, if it was first quarter, or it might have been last year even, where sales of Star Wars merch was down. They actually took a loss that was offset by the sales of Toy Story merch. That wasn't this year. That had to have been a year or two ago.
I think that was probably that's been a little while.
Yeah.
I mean, once they finally got the Mando merch wrapped up, and I don't know if Jay's still in the audience watching, but Drunk 3PO and Park Hoppin', that his stuff, he had great coverage of how that changed in Disney World. And there's a lot of good park channels out there that cover that. Now, like Lorena Creole, same thing. She noticed the same thing. All of a sudden, it's like, the Disney World Galaxy's Edge stores were initially rife with sequel trilogy merchandise.
Right.
And then almost overnight, at least overnight in terms of a business metric, a lot of that disappeared, and the stores were then suddenly flooded with far more classic OG Star Wars, Mando and Mandoverse stuff, namely Grogu, Baby Yoda.
Right.
I mean, and it was a very distinct, I remember watching the video that Drunk did, and I think it was on Park Hoppin', and he goes in there and he's like, everything's different. Like, look at all the new stuff here. And I think, and Jay, if you're still out there, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only thing he found in that video was, I think there was a Rey costume, a Kylo costume, and then some Rey and Kylo lightsabers. And that was about it.
Yeah.
The rest of the store, I mean, everything had flipped over in relatively short order to classic and Mandoverse. Disney, and that was the first sign Disney had recognized, because look, merchandise sales more than anything are the most publicly, easily recognizable measurements of success or failure.
Yes.
When we see things like, think of when Shang-Chi came out, or when Eternals came out, and there were a number of YouTube channels that were noticing that the weekend that the movies had come out, because they usually preempt these films with the toys. They load the toys into the stores as soon as the promotional campaigns for these movies come out, and they expect to start driving sales. By opening weekend or the second weekend of the film, all these Shang-Chi and Eternals toys and all this stuff had hit the discount bins at Target. Like they were being marked down 50, 60, 70%. They were sitting on shelves. We saw the same thing with the sequel trilogy merchandise. It just they had BB-8 was a big seller for the first movie, and then poof, that was it. And I promise you, Hasbro weren't happy with that.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's like they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire licensing rights for these. Disney cuts these deals. And yeah, Disney makes a bunch of money up front from that because of the promise that this will do really well. And then Hasbro and people like that get left holding the bag. But the problem is that bodes ill for future contracts. How willing is a Hasbro to come back to the table with the same kind of offer they made before for this IP after they got torched the last time they signed a contract? And that's what they have. And that's why, to go full circle here, the classic Star Wars stuff was brought up in that previous earnings call, because Hasbro's like, look, we're not paying for this Rey and Kylo crap anymore. Right. Okay? We don't care what you do with it. We'll give you $1. That's it. That kind of thing. They want to go back to making the Star Wars that sells.
Yeah. Well, and you do look at Star Trek the same way, because the distribution rights for the show, to hear Doomcock tell it on the various different streams, shows that he's done, Netflix didn't want it. This show is not doing well. We don't want to pay for it anymore. Season 1 is crap, and season 2 nobody wants it.
That's the only reason Discovery happened, was because Netflix was writing checks.
Yeah.
To Paramount.
Yeah. So
they were covering the entire cost of production and then some.
Yeah. Dave in the chat, Captain Marvel merch was on clearance 3 weeks prior to the film's release, and there were also empty seats in the sold-out theaters. That's the other thing. There is how much of these numbers are cooked just a little bit too. So
people notice things like the gold open thing that was going on, this drive from we want to have the biggest opening weekend possible we can for movies that feature either directors, producers, headline actors of Asian descent of some sort. I mean, it's a big nonprofit organization, and they basically collect money from California millionaires to buy tickets to things like Shang-Chi and Eternals, to drive up the opening weekend numbers, to give it what they call a gold open. You can go look this up right now online. There's a website for it. I am not making this up. This is a real thing. Yeah. Which, again, in and of itself, is it bad? No, certainly not. I mean, I understand wanting to promote your community and all this kind of stuff, but I just understand that the effect that some of these things have. I mean, there was Twitter posts of people, hey, I bought out a whole theater, $1,500 worth of tickets for, and I don't remember what it was, what movie, but it was like a Shang-Chi or something like that in Atlanta or whatever. So they could juice the box office.
Yeah.
Now, how much effect does that really have on opening weekend? Maybe it's 1 million, maybe it's 5 million. We have no idea. But I mean, that kind of stuff is out there, right?
Plus, you've got the prorated and the fluctuating ticket prices, like we saw with Thor: Love and Thunder. So we might have sold fewer tickets, but it's a higher ticket price. So look at here's this great box office that doesn't necessarily. I mean, fewer people are actually going to see the film. And the ticket sales are definitely down. I mean, variable ticket pricing is real. Cinemark has been engaged in this for a couple of years. AMC launched it with the Batman this year with variable ticket pricing, to where, so for example, if you went to the theater and you went to go see Nope, or you went to go see Everything Everywhere All at Once. Great movie, by the way. Yeah.
Loved it. Absolutely loved that movie. You were going to pay kind of the normal ticket price for that. And that would be adjusted, of course, whether you're an adult, a child, whether you're going to see a daytime movie, a nighttime movie. Thor: Love and Thunder, Batman, Doctor Strange 2, Top Gun Maverick, all the big blockbuster, big films that they knew were going to draw a big crowd opening weekend. They would charge $1 to $2 more for those tickets, and they would charge even more money on the opening weekend, especially with Marvel films. Why? What have we learned? Marvel films have become extremely front-loaded. I mean, after the first 5 days of a Marvel film's release, basically that represents half or more than half of its total box office run in the first 5 days.
Yeah, because your week-to-week drop is pretty substantial.
It's awful. There is no hold to these films whatsoever. It's like, oh, well, Thor's made $700 million at the box office. I'm like, well, great. It still hadn't broke even yet.
Yeah.
Not for Disney. I mean, that film probably needs to get to 750, I'd say, at least, for them to be at break even with the $250 million budget and easily another 125. And if they spend 150 on marketing instead of 125, then their break even is going to be closer to 8. And they don't have those markets anymore after the theater. They're not licensing to Netflix anymore. They're bringing everything home to Disney Plus. So once a Disney film leaves the theater, there's no more money. Now, what they're hoping for is this new ad-based tier on Disney Plus can help supplant that. And of course, that's, in theory, fiscally, it's a good idea. But you got to have interest in these films. And if these films aren't really generating enough box office interest to keep people engaged, keep them coming back, having good word of mouth to where it's like, okay, yeah, we had $100 million opening weekend, but the movie was so good that we had $90 million in the second weekend. Hint, hint, Top Gun Maverick.
Right.
That kind of thing. And that's the difference. Universal, they have 2 multi-billion-dollar contracts with Netflix and with Amazon Prime. With Netflix gets to air the animated films. So, for example, Minions Rise of Gru in the Pay One window, 4 months after it airs on Peacock, Universal's own streaming service, the first 4 months of the Pay One window, it goes to Netflix for the next 10 months. Jurassic World Dominion, also Universal.
Right.
That multi-billion-dollar, multi-year deal is with Amazon Prime. So the first 4 months of the post-theatrical Pay One window will be also on Peacock. And then months 5 through 14 will be on Amazon Prime. And then back to Peacock. So they have several billions of dollars of post-theatrical under contract right now for all the films they release, be they animated or live action. Disney has none of that anymore. They've pulled all of that in-house. Pay One windows and likely Pay Two windows. Maybe they still farm out something on a Pay Two window, which is month 19 through 36 or whatever, that they might farm some stuff back to Netflix. But obviously those contracts are worth far less because they're so far removed from the original theatrical release. So that's the big difference.
Well, and
that's the big difference right now.
You compare that to the Warner Brothers Discovery call where Zaslav is sitting there saying, straight to streaming, Paramount or to HBO Max or Discovery Plus or whatever the merged service is going to be. He said, why limit ourselves to just that? He's talking all of these different places. He said, we do theatrical first, and then we look at all of the different opportunities where we can make money putting this movie out in the various different places. And we don't limit ourselves to just lock into HBO Max. Maybe this does go to Amazon. Maybe it goes to Paramount Plus or whatever, ABC Network, or because you got the broadcast and the cable channels that are still out there. And I agree with Zaslav. If you're going to do something like that, put it in as many places as you can. The goal is to make money, right? Profit is still not a terrible thing in some circles. So,
well, Zaslav has recognized the reality of it, that Hollywood's gotten away from chasing the streaming dream, which is it's basically a fool's gold for many of them, and they're finding that out now. And this is why the analysts are catching up to what I've been saying for a year, that you've got to stop looking at sub growth, because that doesn't mean jack squat. Because you can have all the subs in the world and still be losing hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion a quarter. Hint, Disney. On your streaming service. So Disney has lost $2 billion so far through the end of June this year on Disney Plus. That's the operating losses, okay? And that's because that's how much they're spending. And one of the things that Zaslav was talking about correctly is that no, we're not going to spend 150, $200 million on a project that's going to land on HBO Max. That's stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a giant, 16-part epic saga, if it's a kind of Game of Thrones thing where they know that's going to be a huge driver, but they're not going to start throwing risk in that. They're not going to spend $150 million to make a 2-hour movie to drop on HBO Max. That is dumb. If you're going to spend that much money, you're going to put it in the theater, because Zaslav specifically mentioned this in the call. The theatrical release will garner a buzz if it's a good film, of course. There's no better way to advertise to audiences and create a buzz than to drop it in the theater first, because that enhances the buzz that what you get of when you eventually drop it onto your streaming service. And he's correct. And there's no other place that you can generate the kind of revenues potentially as you can in the theater to recover those costs that you've sunk into a production like that.
Plus, if you've got a movie that goes as long as Top Gun Maverick does, for example, then word of mouth drives, that buzz is a completely different level, because I can't believe it's going so long. I can't believe it's still doing well. So you have that on top of everybody talking about how good it is. Now you're also talking about how the legs are doing and how much longevity it's got in the theaters. And that's going to enhance whatever happens post theatrical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's just it, because the value of Top Gun Maverick is now in the stratosphere, right? I mean, they know what they've got. And if they wanted to now license this, if Paramount wanted to license this out, and it's going to go to Paramount Plus first, no doubt, right? But they might want to look at shortening a pay one window, and maybe they license it to an Amazon Prime or to a Netflix or to an Apple TV. Mm-hmm. Because that licensing, if they give them 18 months with it after a few months on Paramount, that movie alone might be worth $200 million in a back-end deal like that.
Yeah.
In addition to what they've already made. I mean, Tom Cruise is already walking home at this point. He's got to be close to $100 million personally off this movie, from what we know.
That's crazy.
Personally, $100 million off this box office. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Now, nobody else gets those deals.
Yeah.
Right now. I mean, he's one of the last real big Hollywood stars that command what they call those gross dollar deals. So yeah, that's it's an unusual situation. But of course, it's going to go a long way to help Dead Reckoning and Dead Reckoning Part 2 over the next 2 summers, which is Mission Impossible 7 and 8.
Yep.
And I think that's great news for him.
Now, let me ask you about the other thing, because you had made a prediction, and we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago before the call, and you were speculating that the Andor premiere, the 3 episodes, was going to be the date that they dropped the ad tier for Disney Plus, and it turns out they're going to launch that in December on the 8th.
Yep.
Which is a Thursday. And so now the discussion is, and I think I've heard you talking about this too with WDW Pro and some others, that possibly could be now when we get the next season of The Mandalorian. Which kind of makes sense, because The Mandalorian is a known quantity. It's got a built-in audience. It's popular. It's been successful for them. I can see them trying to do a big Nielsen push and the ad tier push for that, rather than, we don't know very much about this Andor thing. We don't know how it's going to do. But I think it's telling that they're going with 3 episodes right off the bat.
Well, okay, a couple of things on that. So I had a 2-part prediction for the Disney Plus ad tier, one of which that it was absolutely going to be announced during the earnings call, which it was. I knew that was coming. There was no doubt in my mind, and I've been saying that for probably about a month now. I really thought that once they pushed up they pushed back the Andor release to September 21st and announced the first 3 episodes, I said 2 things. Number one, they saw what they got with Obi-Wan. They got a good story for the press to say biggest premiere ever for Disney Plus based on watch hours, which of course that wasn't hard for Obi-Wan to do, considering it was Obi-Wan and Vader, number one. But more importantly, number 2, nothing else on Disney Plus had ever premiered with 90 to 100 minutes of runtime. in the opening week. Nothing else had done that.
Right.
So that was kind of an easy skate in for them on that one. So my understanding is the first 3 episodes of Andor amount to about 2 hours worth of watch time. So they upped it by about another 30 minutes. So they're going for the same, they're trying to ring that same bell again. And I thought that maybe they would push the ad tier up a little bit to hit that mark. And the reason why I was originally looking at October, that was my original prediction. October into maybe as late as November, that's when the ad tier would launch, because October 1st is the first day of the new fiscal year for Disney. So every year, Disney's fiscal year, which is when they base their tax filings on, launches October 1st. It runs from October 1st to September 30th. So while Warner Brothers, for example, we just had their second fiscal quarter of 2022 earnings call. The call we just got 5 days later from Disney was their third fiscal quarter for 2022, because they're a quarter ahead the way they do it. So I thought October 1st would be, around about a good. I figured they'd want to launch it with the launch of their new fiscal year, but they pushed it back to December 8th. Mando has no set date. I've heard December, I've heard February, I've heard January, I've heard something. Something big has to be launching December 8th in tandem with that tier.
What else?
Very, very close to it.
Yeah. What else could it be?
And that's the biggest thing they have.
Yeah.
So if they can get it ready to go, or if they feel confident enough at this point that it will be ready to go. And look, we know that they've been done filming it, because we got an episode and a half of it with the Book of Boba, whatever that was. So, I mean, we know it's kind of there. The question is, will it still have the same interest level at this point? I think Book of Boba Fett honestly did a lot of damage to Mando.
I agree
with what they did there, and which is a damn shame, but it did. And
but the
Mandalorian
episodes of Boba Fett were the best episodes of the Boba Fett. So
right,
it does damage probably overall, but I think it also points up that the Mandalorian works better than Boba Fett, and that kind of goes back to what Mark and I were talking about before you got here. Is that Mandalorian? My theory has always been that the Mandalorian was supposed to be Boba Fett, and they changed it to Din Djarin because Boba Fett was still dead. And they'd have to go through all of this process of explaining, well, how he come back to life and how is he back and all of this. And now you've got,
Boba Fett was originally supposed to be a movie.
Right. And then all of that happened with Josh Trank, and the whole thing fell apart. But
I think the problem with it is that, as euphoric as everyone was, rightfully so, at the end of season 2 for Mando, when Luke came back, Grogu goes away with Luke, and all of that emotional impact was such a well done finale to that season. And then they literally threw it all in the trash can with Boba Fett. Like 2 weeks later, Grogu just never mind. Forget everything we just did at the season finale. We're back to square one again.
Yeah.
I thought that was a punch in the face. I hated it. I hated everything about it, and it really just kind of soured my mood on. I don't know. I couldn't stand it. I thought it was terrible.
But you're right. The Mandalorian is the biggest thing that they've got. I mean, the full money, but that it's going to be what I don't know how they're gonna do it, but it makes sense that Mandalorian would be what they use for launching. But December's third month of their first quarter, so it's still in those. It's still in.
It's still definitely in the first quarter. There's no doubt. I just didn't think they would hold off that long. So they must have done that for a reason. They must be waiting for a comfortable date to where they know a big show is either ready to launch or is going to be completed post-production. Somebody brought up the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies. Look, Christmas stuff, when you get into that Christmas season, and especially with Disney, with their decades of library content that rolls around at Christmas time, they've got a lot of stuff they could throw on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And movies like that in the holiday season, Christmas time, just get watched 24/7 over and over and over and over and over again. So it could be something as simple as that. However, if that was the case, I'd think they'd try to launch it more like Thanksgiving weekend. That would make more sense because that's when all the Christmas stuff starts rolling. So I think December 8th has to be something pretty big. They have moved premiere dates to Thursdays, and they've done that because of Nielsen. They want that extra day in there. Netflix is still dropping on Fridays. If Disney can drop a show on Thursday, they get an extra 24 hours to basically play catch up.
Yeah.
To make the numbers look better as compared to a Netflix drop that might come the same weekend. Look at Obi-Wan and Stranger Things. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, and we're gonna see how that plays out because She-Hulk has got moved from Wednesdays to Thursdays. So
Right, that's what I'm saying.
We'll see how that goes. I guess that's their first test to see if it's actually going to work for them. Now, if it doesn't move the needle as much as they need it to for Nielsen, what do you think they do at that point?
I don't think they'll fiddle around with it too much, to be honest with you. I think their big test is going to be Andor.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're so concerned about what She-Hulk does. I mean, I'll put it this way: if Andor cannot rake in better numbers than She-Hulk, then stick a fork in it. Star Wars is done. It's dead. It's over.
No.
It's over. And nothing they're going to make to this point is you're never getting back to what you had before Disney took it over. It's done. It's completely done. I mean, and that's just, and I'm not, trying to knock anything specifically,
right.
But, enjoy the Star Wars that is real Star Wars that Lucas did before Disney came to town.
Well, let me ask you this. Does Star Wars recover in the absence of Kathleen Kennedy? Is there a possibility there once she's gone? Because she's not going to last forever. She's going to retire at some point.
No, she'll be there through the end of Indy 5. And then when that comes out next summer, then I think that's when you start seeing the wind down happen. I mean, the woman's going to be in her mid-70s. Let's be honest. I think that she never cared much for Star Wars. She always loved Indiana Jones. She's been trying to get Indiana Jones 5 done now for 6-7 years. I think that's why she's been hanging around or been allowed to hang around. That might have been part of the deal. Of course, all these contracts are sealed under NDAs. We'd never know.
Right.
Fiscally speaking, from a business standpoint, she should have been gone years ago because she has proven herself time and time again to be one of the absolute worst managers of a Hollywood studio that one could hope for. She is absolutely atrocious. To tell me that, she cannot get a film into pre-production for the most valuable IP in Hollywood history in over 6 years. Meanwhile, she's fired more directors and writers than have actually completed projects for Star Wars. That just tells you all you need to know. She shouldn't be there. She shouldn't be allowed to make a cup of coffee, as far as I'm concerned. But there she is. Any case, I think once she's gone, is it possible they could move it forward and do something better with it? Yes, but it's not just Kennedy. It's a lot of the garbage that pollutes Lucasfilm inside that needs to be completely cleaned out. It's a lot of these newer hires and these people that they don't give a crap about the IP. They're there to use the IP as leverage to push political agendas. They all need to be run out of town.
Yeah, but do you think that Chapek, now that he's got his new contract and he's got the unanimous vote of the board, that maybe he starts swinging the axe a little bit more and people start getting the message? Keep your mouth shut, do the work.
Yeah. I think we've already
product.
seen evidence of that. I mean, after that debacle in March and April with Pixar coming out and running their mouth, you haven't heard much out of Pixar since then. You haven't heard much out of Ton Newton, who runs their diversity and BS department, whatever it is.
I saw an article where somebody was wanting to get an interview with her, and the Disney
Variety
people
magazine.
The Disney people said she's not available for comment.
Yeah, Bob Chapek and General Counsel said nope.
Yeah,
can't have her. Go away. That was it. She was
good.
the only one not allowed there. Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah,
she's a big problem at Disney. The bigger problem has already been fired publicly and humiliated. His name was Peter Rice. He's gone. And as soon as Peter Rice got fired, she had to know her butt was on the line.
Yeah.
Shut up. Sit down in your office and don't say a word.
I think there's a few of those who got that signal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's bigger fit. I mean, again, the fandom out there, the people on YouTube, I realize people are focused on Marvel and Star Wars. And my point of saying what I said earlier about the revenues, what they generate compared to other things that Disney Disney does, you have to understand there are much, much bigger fish to fry. The problems are far more deep rooted than just Kathy Kennedy. I mean, as much as I'd love to see her go, and as much as I've complained about her on YouTube, and I think she should go, and by all financial data, like I said, she should have been gone a long time ago because she's atrocious when it. And I'm not talking about what she did to Star Wars. I'm just talking about from a business standpoint.
Yeah, she's cost them a lot of money.
She has cost Disney hundreds of millions, if not billions, since she's been there. I mean, the Star Wars films themselves, with the exception of maybe Rogue One and the first one, The Force Awakens or whatever, the rest of them have all struggled tremendously or lost money.
Yeah.
And the merchandise sales have not been there from the new IP characters that they've created from them, which is what Disney was counting on, right? Because the merchandise is what really makes the money with Star Wars, always has. Okay. The movies have never, I mean, the movies have made a bunch of money, don't get me wrong, but they haven't held a candle to the toys and the merch that Star Wars has sold since 1977. I mean, not even close.
Yeah. The question in the chat is whether Doxy Mama says Bob Iger, but I think she means Chapek wants to clean house or just ride out his contract. I don't think Chapek is just going to sit.
He's been there too long. Chapek wants to leave his mark on Disney. There's only been 7 CEOs of Disney since Walt died. I mean, they don't change these guys out that often. So I know what you meant. No, I knew you meant Chapek. Don't worry about it.
It feels like from his emails that because I in my day job I'll do local hires for stuff here for ESPN and networks and that kind of thing. So I get emails from Chapek to all the Disney employees, right? And the tone of the emails that I got prior to the hostage video, the impression has always been for me that Chapek really wants to change things and put the focus back on profitability and let's not antagonize the customer. And it's a transactional thing. And he understands that there's 2 parts of this transaction. There's I'm selling you something, but you have to buy that something. And it's felt like he's been hamstrung all this time. But now that he's got this new contract, I don't know. I think I'm really surprised that he hasn't done more to this point to clean house. I guess he's doing it incrementally for different things.
He has to. He can't make giant sweeping changes overnight. And as I've said before, I think during some live shows, the best way for Chapek to do this, because everything he's going to do, just like Zaslav right now, is going to be looked at with a microscope by the Hollywood media. Not that he cares ultimately with every word they think, but Disney doesn't like bad PR. They don't like airing dirty laundry. And the easiest way to fix a lot of these problems that causes the least amount of public scrutiny is to let a lot of these people basically disappear through attrition.
Right.
So as their contracts come up for renewal, you just simply don't renew them. Peter Rice was an outlier because Peter Rice was basically he was the king of the problems over there, especially for Chapek personally. I mean, they were trying to get him fired. They were trying to get his contract not renewed. Peter Rice wanted to be installed by the board as CEO.
Yeah.
And he was, he was a big problem. All that stuff that came up, the hostage video, all that stuff, that was all orchestrated by, at least in large part, Peter Rice was involved with that. That's why he had to go. And that's why the board approved his public firing. They didn't wait till his contract ended. And when they fired him, they probably had to pay him out. It's probably a bet at least $10 million. I mean, you can't, Chapek can't make that kind of decision on his own. That'd be something that would have to, I mean, Susan Arnold, the executive committee of the board, which is Susan Arnold and Bob Chapek. But the chairman, Susan Arnold, would have to be involved in a decision like that, almost 99.9% certainly.
Right.
So that was board approved to get rid of him.
Yeah, and given how much controversy was swirling around the whole thing with Florida, and the fact that Susan Arnold is a lesbian, not that it matters, but from an optic standpoint, you would think that if Chapek's position, if his point of view was really that much of a problem, then Susan Arnold would be right there on top of getting him out. But she spoke up and said, we fully commit, and we're all standing behind Bob, and the way it looked to me is that she did that on her own without anybody saying, you really should get out here and say something. But it was an unsolicited vote of support publicly that said, we stand behind Bob. And that, I think, adds more weight to Chapek getting his unanimous new contract more than anything else.
Well, Susan Arnold's not an idiot, right?
Right.
I mean, Susan Arnold is not going to sit there. She knows better than to believe the media hyperbole on what that Florida bill actually was, right? As they called the "Don't Say Gay" bill. There's nothing in that bill that said anything about that. It simply said, no, you're not going to teach, preschoolers through 10-year-olds. You're not going to teach them about gender confusion and sexual identity and all this there's no reason to have these conversations in a classroom with small children like that.
Right.
And I got news for you. The people that I know personally, friends of mine that are part of that LGB community, I don't know a single one of them that disagreed with that bill.
Yeah. Well,
it's like, why would we talk to, 7-year-olds about this?
Yeah.
You got this younger generation, this newer generation now that thinks that, oh yeah, you should indoctrinate them as early as you can. And look, Susan Arnold, I just don't think she's one of those people. It's like, we know what the bill says. We just don't want these kind of conversations being held in classrooms with children, especially without parental consent, without parental knowledge, and the fact that some of these educators, teachers, whatever they call themselves nowadays, wanted to have these conversations with kids and then conceal it from parents. Well, that was the problem. That's why the bill was written.
And the bill, I read it, and I read it the 7 pages before it got signed and the 5 pages afterwards. The bulk of it has to do with parents having access to the information about what their kids are being taught. I mean, that whole thing that everybody's
the Parental Notification and Education Bill, House Bill 1557. That's what it was called.
Yeah. The whole thing about sex was one line of the bill. I mean, it wasn't even a majority of it. It wasn't even half of it. It was one item in this whole thing about you're not going to shut the parents out of the process of educating the kids. They have a right to know everything that's being taught to their kids. And
that's
for them to mischaracterize it so blatantly and so completely hyperbolic, look what they're doing, and I was like, how do you? They wouldn't have been able to do it without the media cooperating with them.
Well, that's just it. I mean, that was all entirely orchestrated by certain very small numbers of factions inside Disney that are very vocal, but they have the backing of people like LaTondra Newton, who's their chief diversity and BS officer.
Yeah.
People like Peter Rice, who's no longer there because he got fired because of stuff like this. So that's kind of more or less what's going on with that. But it's going to take a while. Chapek got renewed. Chapek got renewed for 3 years. He's going to spend the next 3 years diving down this rabbit hole, and it may take longer. Y'all got to remember, it took Robert Iger almost 10 years to get Disney that far left. It's not going to get fixed in a month.
Yeah.
It's not going to get fixed in a year. It's going to take time. And the projects we're seeing come out now, and I'll close with this because family's getting home in just a few minutes, but I appreciate y'all having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, this was.
But I was going to say, just everybody remember right now with Disney, what you're seeing come out, like with Lightyear, with Strange World, whatever they wind up doing with that in November, I don't know yet for sure. All this stuff was greenlit 2, 3, 4 years ago now, especially with the COOF and the lockdowns in the middle of it.
Right.
Right? That delayed everything. you're still the stuff that's coming out this year and even into next year is still stuff that was greenlit, meaning it was funded and approved, put under contract back when Iger was still around. So the actual long-term effects of whatever Chapek is doing behind the scenes right now, we may not see publicly, at least in the films. It might be another couple of 2 years or so or more before we really start seeing that meet itself out.
Yeah.
But again, we're already seeing, and this is, again, you have to, everybody wants to pick on like, oh, well, another thing on Disney Plus came out, another thing in the movie came out, but they want to ignore the things like Peter Rice got publicly humiliated, which Hollywood was shocked and they hated it. And I mean bad. That hit them like a ton of bricks in the face, Hollywood in general, because he was a big dude in Hollywood. No way he's getting fired. He got fired. But other things, you know, if Chapek was just like Iger, everybody think about this. Why would Iger be out there constantly lamenting what Chapek is doing? Why would he be constantly complaining about Bob Chapek, which he is and has been?
Yeah.
You know, for Iger to come out and make comments like, well, you know, you can't let all the money and the bottom line get in the way of creativity. That was a direct strike at Chapek, because that's exactly what Chapek is doing. And it's like, no, you do have to, because look at the money. You can't keep spending $250 million on a Marvel film like Thor: Love and Thunder and then just sit there and go, oh, well, we loved it because we thought it was so creative. Never mind that we lost money on the movie. And we have nowhere else to make money on this movie anymore because it all goes to Disney. No, that's bogus. That's a bunch of crap.
Yeah, because you got a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. I mean, there's legal action that can be taken. If the shareholders sit there and say, you're not looking out for my investment, that could end up in court.
Well, that's just it. It's fiduciary responsibility. And I think the call last week with Zaslav and his tone for Warner Brothers, and he came out and swung with both fists. That probably put a lot of extra juice in Chapek's step. Because now he knows I'm not the only guy. Everybody's going to be looking at David Zaslav now as the new sheriff in town. And that is going to take, I think, a lot of pressure off Chapek in terms of he might be able to do a little bit more quickly himself. Because kind of Zaslav has stepped in and he's like, well, Warner Brothers is doing it.
Yeah,
we can jump in and do it. And then you might see that start over the next several years. It might take 5 or 10 years, but you'll start seeing that trickle out to everybody else because they're going to have to realize they have to make money.
Yeah.
Analysts they don't care about how many subs you have anymore. And I've been saying that for a year. They don't care how many subs you are. They want to see the value, how much money you're making off those subs. That's why Disney Plus just jumped, 40% in its pricing, because they have to. They're making $6 average revenue per user. Netflix is making $16.
Well, and you and I talked back. I guess it was after the Warner Brothers call about the Allen and Company Summit, and we had said probably that Chapek and Zaslav were comparing notes. You said they definitely had conversations there. I would expect that they probably are in contact with each other all the time because they're basically Hollywood's bad boys right now. I mean, Hollywood hates them both.
Yeah.
And who they have to turn to but each other and sit there and say, no, you can't.
I hope Bob Chapek and David Zaslav are having breakfast meetings every morning. God, I hope they are.
Yeah, cigars. And scotch.
I know they're not, but I mean, I would love it. I mean, maybe they're talking once a week. Who knows? Whatever. But they can be each other's support for this. And again, it's two different things entirely. Again, because Disney is a much bigger company than Warner Discovery, no doubt. I mean, and the bulk of the revenues come from things like parks and from merch and from linear content with sports, which HBO Warner has as well, but just not anywhere near to the degree that Disney does between ESPN and ABC on the sports side, and then all the other linear networks that they have in addition to that.
Yeah.
And again, those items absolutely dwarf, by orders of magnitude, they dwarf Marvel, they dwarf Lucasfilm, and they dwarf Pixar. Disney Animation Studios for that matter. But again, if those studios don't, if they go several years without cranking out any new, really publicly viable content that drives sales, then you're going to start feeling it impact things like merchandise more and the parks more, because that has to be replenished. I mean, there's a reason why if you go to the Disney parks, the biggest attractions there in terms of character meetups are still what? Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella.
Yep.
I mean, it's the classic princesses, right? Jasmine, Belle, Ariel, from the 90s, the Alan Menken era with Disney. But those characters are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old in some cases.
Yeah.
And they're still drawing it in. There's nothing new. Got to be something new. They can't keep going down this road making, mediocre stuff. And if John Lasseter and Skydance has his way now with their deal with Apple, I mean, he's bringing back the old Pixar. That whole original Pixar team, that the big guys are all over at Skydance now with Lasseter again, and they're making movies for Apple TV.
Well, and
what do you think's going to happen
Universal
in 5 years when they start burying Disney?
Yeah, I saw something. Was it Magic Mountain or some? There's a Universal. The Minions are getting some sort of an addition in a Universal park, I think. I'm not sure.
Well, they're already in Universal. I guess they're just making another piece of it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't think
multi-billion-dollar three little stupid yellow ovals wearing jeans are worth probably somewhere around between the movies and the merch, somewhere around $10 billion. Figure that one out.
That drives me crazy. My God.
Yeah. All right, Valliant. Well, you got family coming, so check out Valliant's YouTube channels. He's got 2 of them: Valliant Renegade and Renegade Online, which is the replay stuff. Let me ask you, how is that working for you to have both of those like that? Because we just set up our TV.2 to do kind of the same thing, where we got live stuff here, the replay stuff over there. Have you noticed any kind of a difference?
I was right up until YouTube changed the algorithms again recently.
Oh yeah.
So now I'm leaving the live streams up on the main channel longer, because before, if you left live streams up, it screwed up the algorithms, and they didn't want you to live stream. They wanted you to make videos. Now it seems like they want you to live stream more, because at the same time, it's like my video view count went from whatever it was. I was getting 12, 13, 14,000 views on videos. Then it dropped down to 4, 5. And I was like, wait, what? And then the live streams went from, a few hundred to 800.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is the problem with YouTube. They don't explain what they're doing. So content creators like us are just left walking in the dark trying to figure out what changed this week.
Yeah.
What do I need to do now? Oh, I had this whole rhythm going.
Yeah.
And now something has changed, we think, but we don't know exactly what it is, and we don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Jeremy at the Quartering says that now their focus is on shorts.
Well, they said that last year.
Yeah.
But now apparently it's more of a focus on shorts, which most of our kind of subscribers don't give a flying flip about and don't want to see.
No.
So, I got to make more shorts, I guess. At least
I just say we just do everything the way we always do, and just ignore the algorithm and see what happens. But because YouTube will change it again in 6 months.
Well, that's just it. They'll change again. They'll hear from enough creators that'll complain about it. I mean, I'm not changing from making videos. I'm going to still make videos. I got to make one later tonight or maybe tomorrow, and put it out. Either if it did go out in the morning, it might go out Saturday morning. But you just don't know anymore. Yeah. All I can do is keep making the content that I like making, and then hope it works.
Yeah.
Well, I do recommend that all of you, if you have not started following Valliant over on his channel, that you do so. Also, you can find him over on Twitter as well. Are you on any of the alt-right, yucky types of alt-tech platforms, Valliant?
Not really.
No.
I don't. And the only reason I set up Twitter was because you kind of have to do that if you have a YouTube channel to be able to communicate with other YouTubers. I don't think I have anything else. I think I downloaded Parler one time, and I downloaded Truth one time just to see what it was. I think I still have accounts on them. Do I use them? though, because I don't care. Just so YouTube and Twitter, I'm sticking to that for now for Valiant Renegade. I think I'll leave it there. At least for now.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll go back and make a Facebook account again. But yeah, pretty simple guy.
Thank you for being here, sir. We really do appreciate it and value your insight. I'm glad we finally were able to get you on a show and do stuff. So go have fun with your family. We will definitely do this again. I appreciate you being here, sir.
Take care. Good to see you guys.
All right, you too. And let's see. Let's do that and this. And let's do that. Hang on a second.
Ooh.
Whoop. Wait a minute. I hit the wrong button there. All right, there we go. I know. Hang on. Because I had to change something so we could get you back.
So basically, while you're doing that, Jason, I feel like my big takeaway in that conversation was that basically I feel like I'm right. Disney needs to come up with like new characters and stuff because they've been coasting on the same things for the last like God knows how long, right?
Well, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think, but the other thing though, I mean, you look at Star Trek, you look at Star Wars, you look at Marvel and DC, and there is value to these classic characters. There's a reason why these characters have lasted for as long as they have. It's because
That's
the characters
true.
work. It's because of the way they were created, the way they were written to start with, and the legacy that these characters have through the various different people who have written the stories over the years. For the most part, until you get to the most recent, like say the last 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, the people who have been writing the stories, especially in the comics, have felt a responsibility to maintain the legacy. This is not their thing. I don't own Superman, but I have a responsibility not only to the fans, but to the creators of Superman, to everybody that has written Superman stories before. Everything now, I have this responsibility to maintain the integrity of the character. And it's only in the last 5, 6 years, 8 years that doesn't hold anymore, because the people that are now writing all of this stuff, especially in the comics, but you also see it in the video games and in books, they're writing their Netflix pitch using somebody else's IP. And coming up with new characters is all fine and well and good, but your motivation behind what characters you're creating is flawed. We need a gay superhero. We need a lesbian superhero. We need a bisexual superhero. We need somebody with purple hair. We need somebody who's overweight. And all of this stuff that becomes identitarian instead of character driven, they're not going to last. They're not going to survive because they don't have any redeeming characteristics and qualities internally. It's all about what they look like on the outside. What's their skin color? What's their sexual orientation? What's their gender? How many pronouns are they using? Which pronouns are they using? It's all of that. And those kind of characters is not going to survive, because we've had gay characters in stories before. As long as your stuff is well written, whatever that is, that's the stuff is going to that's the stuff that's going to last. And Dr. Mommy, you're right. Your demographic is not your personality. And a lot of people that are in the business right now don't understand that.
That's true. So basically, it should be like those things shouldn't be like your only character traits, right? Like I know what you mean. Like I have realized, like they kind of get in the way of telling a good story, because it's like more often than not, I see these things and I'm just like, okay,
yep,
all right,
yep.
And like that's just how I feel about that stuff in general. And it's like we won't get into politics or anything like that now, but it's
politics
just
is part of it, though.
Yeah,
and
that's true. I guess you kind of
it
you
drives
can't avoid it no matter
everything
how
now,
much you
you
try.
know?
But
And
yeah,
and if you don't like something, and we saw this with Reva when they were talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi before it ever came out. They made it all about the black woman. And if you don't like this, you know the people who don't like this are racist, right? You know they're going to be some people around there who complain about this. They're racist, and they're preemptively trying to deflect whatever criticism you come from the show because the show's not written very well. Oh well, you're just a racist. You're just a sexist. You're just a misogynist. You're just yeah. And
it's like I don't like her, but it's because she's a poorly written character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and it just like it feels again that just goes back to it's hard to have an opinion these days and not have people jumping down your throat and stuff, right?
Well, and people, you've got people that are sitting there saying, strong female characters, and talking about, like for example, Amber Midthunder, who's in the new Predator movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of these new female lead characters, you've got Michael Burnham over on Star Trek Discovery, you've got Captain Marvel, you've got the way that Twitter treats them, it's almost like you'd never had female lead action stars before ever. Ripley didn't exist. Sarah Connor, who?
Yeah.
It's like, hold on, this is not a new thing. We had Catherine Janeway, and we had Leia Organa, and we had, Ripley and Sarah Connor and Lara Croft. Things happened before you were born, kid. That's what I want to say to these people, because this is stuff we've had these kind of characters in the past. But if it's not current year and it's not your thing that you did, then it doesn't count. I just want to slap people upside the head sometimes when they get into this stuff.
Yeah, it's like just because it hasn't happened in a while, because I'll admit in like the last, like probably since the year 2000, there hasn't been a lot of like female-led action movies, but that doesn't mean they didn't happen, right?
Right. Well, I mean, see, the other part of that though is you haven't had very much of anything because the superhero movies have dominated everywhere. And how long have we been sitting there saying we want a Black Widow movie, and we finally get one, but it's like 10 years too late. And they rebooted Charlie's Angels again, and Elizabeth Banks comes in and says, "Well, nobody watched it because they're all sexist." Well, no, you made a lousy movie, and nobody wanted to go see it because it's badly
That's
written.
what people said about that Ghostbusters movie with Melissa McCarthy too, but it's the exact same thing.
And that was the beginning.
Wasn't a good movie.
Yeah, that was the beginning of where all of this started. I think people can trace it back to that. It might have been a little bit before that, but Ghostbusters 2016 was really when everybody started doubling down on this. If you don't like it, you're an istophobe stuff. And it just went off the rails from there. And of course, you could trace it back even further to the election of Donald Trump. And we're not going to get into that. But the political aspects of everything colored all of it. And you have these people that go hard left progressive Marxist now, and then everybody else is bad person evil. And how dare you disagree with us, and how dare you criticize us, and how dare you think we're wrong. And that colors everything. It colors politics, it colors economics, it colors healthcare. Yes, thank you, Death Angel. Diana Perez, we had Wonder Woman, we had Wilma Deering, we had
oh yeah, true.
We had 7 of 9. We had I want to say there were female Power Rangers from the very beginning. You know, the Battlestar Galactica reboot gave us a female Starbuck.
Yeah, and it's like it's funny that you bring up Star Wars, because having like the two girls on the team, that was actually, because I'm a huge Power Rangers nerd, so like I know everything about it. That was like an American thing first, because like in the ones that were in Japan that came before, like the Yellow Ranger was always a guy.
Yeah.
And like they only had one girl, but then Power Rangers changed that, and then it retroactively changed the what do you call it, like the dynamic of the whole series after.
Yeah. Well, and you know, even if your lead character is not female, there have been strong female characters in science fiction forever. You know, I mean, Bionic Woman, who started off as a supporting character, just a guest shot for Lindsay Wagner over on $6 Million Man, she gets her own show. You know, and you have, you know, however many, you got Uhura in Star Trek, you have T'Pol in Enterprise, you've got Deanna Troi and Dr. Crusher and Kira Nerys in Star Trek. So it's not an unknown thing. It's not an unusual thing to have, well, and this is the key, they've got to be well written, and that's one of the reasons why people reject Rey, because she's a Mary Sue. She didn't have to work for anything. She hadn't earned for anything. She didn't fail at anything.
Yeah.
She didn't struggle. It's just here's this thing, here's this legacy you can have. Now you have all of this power. And
it's like, that's why, if you remember, I did that piece on Final Fantasy VII, and then those are like my favorite group of characters in anything ever, because of what you said. Like, they struggle, and like one of them goes through like a mental health thing, and it's just like they were extremely well written characters, and like the girls were like my favorite part of that whole story. And it's just like, man, I don't know what the deal is. It's like, you know what it is, maybe because it's Japan based, and like those guys know how to write stories, I found. And it's like, we can learn something from them, I swear.
It's not really so much that is the fact that you have a lot of writers in the United States are driven by an agenda that doesn't have anything to do with story, and that's where the thing breaks down. Manga, there's a reason why manga now has 70% of the revenue market share in the United States in sales.
Does it really? Wow,
70%. Cool. So all of the money that's being spent on comic books and graphic novels and manga, 70% of that money is going to manga.
As an avid manga lover myself, that makes me happy to hear.
But it also said, you know, on the flip side of that is you got DC and Marvel that are struggling, and IDW and Valiant Entertainment may be going away. You know, all of these other publishers, they're not selling books. And one of the reasons why they're not selling books is because the people writing their books are writing their stories to be Netflix pitches instead of writing comic books. And you get the same kind of thing with the Star Wars comic books and everything else, you know. And Star Wars has an additional problem where they're sitting there saying, well, it's all canon. So if you go and watch a movie, or you go see a TV show, and there's something like Kurzenstan, the big black Wookiee bounty hunter guy that shows up in Book of Boba Fett, you know, there are people who are excited about seeing him, but they're the ones who have been reading the comic book. They recognize him from the comic book. Well, now I have to go to the comic book to understand what you're doing in the TV show. There's people that are not going to buy into that.
Yeah, and like that's what I've noticed. Like Marvel has been really guilty of that now. Like where I've noticed, like it was there when the first few movies, but like they were just like hidden Easter eggs for the comic readers. But now I found, like, I remember I watched Doctor Strange 2, and it's like you don't get what's going on if you haven't seen like the other material and stuff. And it's just like, man, it really really soured me on that movie.
It's becoming too dependent on the interconnectivity. I don't mind a shared universe. I'm perfectly fine with that. But in your shared universe, there has to be some wiggle room for individual stories that don't depend on other things. And I think that they need to understand that.
Yeah.
Or the
like
whole
not every movie has to be like a world-ending event like Infinity War and Endgame was. So
And
no, I get that.
Death Angel Shadow is right. Rey's least favorite character in the new Star Wars. Problem is they never explored the characters that had the most potential. They turned them into clowns. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Finn got done dirty.
Yeah.
There was a lot of potential there. And there was, as much as I hate The Last Jedi, Rose Tico had some potential as well. But again, this goes back to how the character is treated by the people making the movie, how the character is treated by the writers, how the character is treated by the director. Kelly Marie Tran did a fine job with what she had, but her character was written for crap.
Yeah, and then it's the exact same thing as with Reva, where people start saying it's a race thing, and it's like, no, it isn't. It's so stupid that people harassed her over that.
And there's no proof that anybody ever did. That's the narrative. That's the story that Kelly Marie Tran got harassed off the internet, and all of this racism, but nobody's ever shown any proof of it. And that's the other thing. And I think I want to say it was Steve Walton did a whole video on it. It was like 3 hours long digging into this. It might have been Mecha Random. I can't remember. Somebody did a video that went back and documented and actually looked into that particular allegation and couldn't find any proof whatsoever that there had been any racism or harassment or anything. Maybe a comment or two, because whoever Moses Ingram got a few that she shared with people, but we don't even know that they're legitimate. That could just be that somebody typed it in and sent it to her, so she's got something to show people. It doesn't prove anything, and it certainly doesn't show that the entire fandom is this toxic monolith. And Doxy Mombi, you're right. The interconnectivity is why Captain Marvel was so successful box office wise, because they shoehorned it in between the two Avengers movies.
Yeah, I feel like in that case, because I honestly feel like Captain Marvel wouldn't have done nearly as good as it did if it didn't do that. Because that was the very start of like the meh Marvel movies for me.
Well, Captain Marvel had three things wrong with it. One, you had Brie Larson coming out ahead of time doing some publicity for other stuff, basically saying, we're not making these stories for no white men anymore, so we don't even need critics who are white and male or whatnot. I mean, they're doing that. And then they market it as her story, right? It's the feminist, the lean into feminism to market this thing. As and everybody looked at it and go, oh, she's going to be a Mary Sue. She's not going to think. And it didn't look that interesting. It was predictable. The fact that it was a prequel, it took place, 10 years before. And
I definitely wasn't interested in it.
Then they retconned the Avengers because that was her call sign. No, that's not how it did. And then they gender swapped Marvel. So, but the other thing, Doxy Mom was right. Everybody was figuring, oh, well, we've got to go see this movie because at the end of Avengers Infinity War, you've got Jackson's character, Nick Fury, pops the thing in to call Captain Marvel. And everybody's like, oh, Captain Marvel. And now we're going to get the Captain Marvel movie. So we think we're going to have to see this Captain Marvel movie in order to have a piece. And again, it's that interconnectivity. We got to see this movie in order to fully appreciate what happens in Endgame. And we didn't. There was nothing in Captain Marvel that you had to have in order to watch Endgame. She shows up, she does a couple of things, but she's got all of 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the movie? She didn't do squat. So, she's completely unnecessary.
Because you know what it was? Because I feel like because they couldn't have her do anything in Endgame, because if they did, she would honestly just fix everything herself. Because like that one scene where she's actually fighting Thanos, and then like she's actually winning, and like she's the only character that could like beat him in a fight, and it's like you could tell that they kept her like in a minor role because of how overpowered she is.
Yeah. And Death Angel's right. This stuff isn't for us, and then they complain that we don't buy it. Yeah, You're right. The only way to win is not to play, and it's the same. It's the same thing. And this is what I keep telling people, and I have said this, and I maybe don't say it enough on the air. We've got to stop giving oxygen to the trolls. We have to stop paying attention. I see people on Twitter especially. And I've seen Anna do this. You know, that Star Wars girl does it. Tug's done it. A few different people. You know, Yellow Flash on it. So you'll get these people who will complain, and then they respond to the complaints, and it just goes on and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Stop paying attention to the people who are trolling.
Just ignore them. Yeah, they're looking for attention.
Exactly right. And
it's the same as bullies in school. Just ignore them. That's what I did, and I came out fine.
And I've got to say, if you're Fandom Menace, or if you're, at Comicsgate or any of these other things, this is especially true as well on that side of the argument too. Don't be the bully. Don't be the troll. Don't be the one who instigates these things, because it never ends well. You're never going to convince anybody of your point of view. The lines have been drawn, the trenches have been dug, everybody's dug into their positions, and now they're just fortifying and hardening their places there, and you're not going to get anywhere in any kind of discussion. It's just not going to happen. If that happens, it's going to happen off Twitter. It's going to happen offline. You're going to have an in-person, face-to-face conversation with somebody. Then maybe you might make a little headway. But it's never going to happen online. And we need to get past this notion that we can argue with people on Twitter, because it doesn't do any good.
Yeah. Basically, you know what the moral of the story is? Just be nice to each other. I don't understand why that's not the
just
norm.
So hard
but
to do, though.
Yeah. Just be nice to each other. I know it sounds like a crazy concept, but
yeah. And on the heels of me telling you to stay off of Twitter, here's all of our social media platforms where you can find us. I do want to encourage you to connect with us on Odyssey. We do also have a second channel on YouTube. It's Sci-Fi For Me TV.2. I don't know that we're going to keep it, but it's there. We're putting the uploads there, and so it's the non-live replay version, I guess, archive, catalog, whatnot. So you can find that over there. Okay, so tomorrow, new Live from the Bunker, one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday scheduled for August. And then on Saturday, we've got a new Good Morning Multiverse with the week's headlines.
I'll be on that.
Mark will be there on that, and we'll have all of the week's stories, most of the week's stories, and that's at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central. So join us for that. Also, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, we do invite you to do that. And then we'll be back to do this all next week on our regular Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central. That's going to do it for us tonight. Mark, thanks for being here, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me as always, Jason.
All right. And I do want to thank Valliant Renegade for dropping in. It's finally good. It's good to finally have him in on a stream. So hopefully we can get him back for future discussions. In the meantime, go check out his channel, connect with him over on Twitter, and we will be back to do all of this next week. See ya.
Bye.
Copyright 2022 by Flaming Dog Media, LLC. All rights reserved. No portion of this program may be retransmitted without the express written consent of Flaming Dog Media. You're watching Sci-Fi For Me TV, delivering the multiverse since 2009.